In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'll tell you 3 ways you saw a big difference between the Dallas Mavericks and New Orleans Pelicans after Tuesday night's loss, and also why that loss is actually more important and a bigger deal than you may realize. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Wednesday, breaking down the Pelicans' big loss to the Dallas Mavericks, 132-91. We're going to get into 3 real differences between these two teams and what the takeaways are from that. And there's some really interesting ones, I think. So we're going to break that down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Don't forget Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. You can sign up over at LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So let's get into this one. Pelicans losing 132-91, a 41-point loss to the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas, who has not been tremendous this year, coming out and just completely running over the New Orleans Pelicans. I want to start with this. This loss is bigger than you may realize. I don't know if it'll ultimately matter with what I'm about to say here, but this was an NBA Cup game, the second one that the Pelicans have played after winning their first one against the Denver Nuggets on Friday. You get 4 NBA Cup games to advance to the knockout stages. This also counts for the regular season. If you want to know more about the NBA Cup and you don't already, you can just go look that up. We're not going to get into the details here, but one of the tiebreakers when it comes to advancing to the knockout stages is point differential. That actually worked out in the Pelicans' favor last year. You know what's not going to help you in your point differential is losing by 40. This basically eliminates the tiebreaker for New Orleans and gives it to any other team, in my opinion, that they probably end up playing. That's why this is kind of big. That's why you saw the Dallas Mavericks pouring it on. You've seen a couple NBA teams do this when they know, hey, we're going to keep running over this team and keep trying to score because this is an NBA Cup game and the differential truly does matter. So losing by 41 kills you in that regard. So in today's show, we're going to look at 3 areas that were really different and what the Pelicans can learn from that and do differently tonight against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who just suffered their first loss of the season, 117 to the Boston Celtics. I want to start with the star players. Star players need to play well, but it also helps when they have other people here. Look at how Brandon Ingram was defended versus how Luka, Doncic, and Kyrie Irving were defended. We'll get into more of the defensive stuff in the next segment here. Brandon Ingram was doubled every single time he touched the ball. It's a near miracle, in my opinion, that he had 17 points on 15 shot attempts. He was 6 of 15 from the field, 3 of 4 from the line, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 turnovers. He was basically in jail the whole game and couldn't do anything because they threw 2 at him every single time, and it limited some of the playmaking that he could do because they were doubling him up at the top of the 3-point line. And the Mavericks weren't scared of anyone else beating them. And the Pelicans shot under 40% from the field in this one. They took just 32 3-point attempts here. And I want to get into the 3-point attempts probably later in the week of why that number's still not going up. It has to do with roster construction, and this is when we'll look at the front office in that show. But no one else was a threat. You had Trey Murphy, who scored 19 points, leading scorer for the Pelicans here. He's 2 of 7 from 3. 5 of 13 overall. He's still finding his way back and into a rhythm here. So it was going to be basically all on Brandon Ingram, Brandon Boston Jr. to carry the load, and they just weren't able to do it. And look, I'm not really faulting them for it. when you have two guys thrown at you every single time, there's only so much you can do. For Brandon Boston, as good as he's played, and I've been really pleased with what we've seen from him, he scored just 10 points on 11 shot attempts because he's being forced to take bad shots. But also, look, he just isn't a starter. This is someone who should be coming off the bench, not going up against a starting unit, and he's not going to play nearly as well. When this team is healthy and he shifts to a more natural role, which is off the bench as that kind of scorer against weaker defenders, he'll thrive more. But that's not where we are right now. These guys are basically trying to play like up a level, and they're not capable of doing that, and that's not really a knock on them. It's just the limitations of what these injuries are doing to your team right now. And it made Brandon Ingram incredibly easy to defend. Contrast that to Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. They're playing one-on-one the whole time because you have other threats on the court. You double Luka, Kyrie's going to be open, or Klay Thompson's going to be open, or Derek Lively for a pass down low. Those are the type of issues that you run into when you're this injured. And that's why Luka and Kyrie in this game were a plus 28, that's tied for second best on the Mavericks team. Because there were other threats there. They're also good players too, so they can get it done. But we've seen this team limit them before. But when you're so injured, you can't really do that. And that kind of puts the Pelicans in a position. And when Dallas is healthy, and they are right now, that also is really going to limit you in what you're capable of doing. So you saw this contrast here. This is, partially on Brandon Ingram, but this is also on the coaching staff to put Brandon Ingram and help him, right? This is why after the playoffs in that series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, you saw Brandon Ingram going to Willie Green and, reportedly yelling at him like, help me get open and all of that. And at the time, I didn't really agree with all of that because he was being locked down one-on-one by Lou Dort. This was different, though. If he's getting double-teamed, they need to come up with an offensive game plan of what do you do, how do you handle that, and the Pelicans did not have that. And that's part of the reason why they turned the ball over 21 times in this game and let the Dallas Mavericks just get 35 easy fast break points. 21 turnovers turned into 28 points off turnovers for the Dallas Mavericks. That's on coaching. One of the things we wanted to see is get Brandon Ingram closer to the basket. Notice his free throws aren't particularly high this year. Get him closer to the basket so it's easier for him to get to the rim and try and score that way. Maybe get fouled. Put him on the block. This is something we talked about last week, the week before here on Locked On Pelicans that they need to be doing more of. Put your players in position to succeed. And while there's injuries and limitations to this team, you did not really see them have any sort of game plan or preparation for what to do with those doubles from the Dallas Mavericks. That's not good. You need to be ready for that because, look, it's pretty obvious what to do against this team right now with some of the guys that are playing. Look, Jalen Noel ain't going to beat you. Trey Jemison ain't going to beat you. It's going to need to be Brandon Ingram, Brandon Boston Jr., Trey Murphy until some of the other guys get back. They're not back yet. What are you going to do against the Cleveland Cavaliers? Because I'd be willing to bet they're going to throw two at Brandon Ingram. Do you have an adjustment? Do you have a game plan for it? We're going to find out tonight, but if they don't, we're going to be pretty critical of this team in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. But look at how different it was for the star players on each team. A lot of that has to do with injuries. The majority of that truly has to do with injuries. Getting Brandon Ingram closer to the block, putting him in position to succeed when you just don't have enough talent here doesn't mean that you're going to do better. 41-point loss, even with the injuries, is not a good look for New Orleans, particularly in an NBA Cup game when that does matter a little bit more. Let's go into the defensive game plan because the Dallas Mavericks had a good one, but the Pelicans' defense in this one was bad, just flat out bad. And while they made an adjustment, they seemed kind of surprised by this, and there was a lack of further adjustments. Let's get into that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And all you have to do is just go to FanDuel.com to join today. The Dallas Mavericks were a big favorite. It ranged from -10.5 to -14.5. They won by 41. Might be time to just kind of bet against New Orleans right now when it comes to these spreads. And right now when I'm looking at it, they're 13-point underdogs to the Cleveland Cavaliers, might be time to take that minus 13 if you think Cleveland's going to run over New Orleans here. And if you win that $5 bet, you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason. And now, go to LockedOnDaily.com. Type it in on your phone, on your computer, your laptop, whatever it is. LockedOnDaily.com. Scroll down until you see the Locked On Pelicans logo. Click on it. Put in your email address and sign up for the Locked On Pelicans free daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. There's my story in there, a story about the NBA in general and big time trends that you're seeing. We've hired a couple of really great NBA writers. Then there's fantasy basketball advice to help you win your league with the GOAT, Josh Lloyd. A couple of links to other Pelicans articles that others have written that are really informative. And there you go. It takes like 2 minutes to read the whole thing, and you're going to get caught up on everything you need to know about the team and the league here. So go to LockedOnDaily.com and sign up today. One of the articles that was in there the other day is like, why are there so many injuries? It's not just a New Orleans Pelicans thing. This is a league-wide trend. We'll break that down probably next week as we get into like tanking and more discussions about that, because this game kind of makes you think like maybe they need to do that sooner rather than later. So let's keep talking about this game, the 132-91 loss for the Pelicans, 41-point loss. The defensive game plan in this one was bad by the Pelicans. Straight up bad by the Pelicans. And look, truthfully, with the injuries, no Herb Jones, no Dejounte Murray, I don't know if they were going to have any defensive game plan against a Dallas Mavericks team that has been up and down but has enough talent to be really good. So when you look at this team, the Dallas Mavericks, look, they let Kyrie and Luka play one-on-one, trying to clamp down on these other guys. It didn't work, right? Kyrie had 18 points. Luka had 26. Combined, they had 12 total assists. They also made 7 threes. They were 7 for 13, so above 50% from three here. That game plan didn't work. When you look at some of the other guys that are key for them, Derek Lively, PJ Washington, they combined for 13 points. Clay had 19. Quentin Grimes had 12. Daniel Gafford at 11. They were scoring in kind of all different ways, but it really was Kyrie and Luka making the engine go. Derek Lively can't score if he can't get the ball. Same thing for Daniel Gafford. Clay at this point is more of a catch and shoot guy. He made 6 field goals. 5 of them were threes. Clamp down on your facilitators, the point of attack guys in Luka and Kyrie, and make others beat you. Now they might. They probably would have. There's enough talent here that if you doubled Luka Doncic, doubled Kyrie, well, one of those two is going to be open, or Derek Lively is going to be open, or PJ Washington, right? Or Daniel Gafford. But I'd rather those guys do it than the star players who are good. Make their life difficult, and you just did not see the Pelicans do that whatsoever. And it got even worse because the Dallas Mavericks were in control of this game and in control of the Pelicans defense. You saw them hunting mismatches, hunting switches. The Pelicans defense is a switching scheme. When it comes to defense, when you're kind of identifying what they do or how you defend it, it's how do you defend the pick and roll? And that is how you kind of define defense in the NBA. There's a really good book by Mike Prada called Spaced Out that if you want to know more about like X's and O's of modern day basketball, that is my favorite book out there. I highly recommend that. Spaced Out by Mike Prada, Prada. Really excellent. And there's a big chapter on NBA defenses that I think is worth everybody reading. So your defense is defined by how you defend the pick and roll. And there's multiple ways that you can do that. What the Pelicans do is switch. They've done this the past couple of years, and it's led them to a lot of success. So I don't want to rag on it too much here, but it was the wrong idea going into this game. What you do with the switch is when the big man sets a screen for the guard. So say Derek Lively sets the screen for Luka Doncic. You have your big man, Trey Jemison, on the opponent's big. Then you have your guard. Let's say it's Brandon Boston Jr. on Luka. And on the switches, they switch. So when Luka comes off that screen from Derek Lively, now you have Trey Jemison on him. And then it's Brandon Boston Jr. on the big man, Derek Lively in this example that we're using. And that basically allows like no space. You can just stay on your guy and there's a body on a body every single time. And then Luka, anytime a big was switched on him, took advantage. Kyrie Irving, anytime a big was switched on him, took advantage. That was what the Dallas Mavericks wanted. And the Pelicans were like, yeah, sure, we'll keep doing it for you. Here you go. Here's the switch. Now, they did change. In the second quarter, they switched to a zone defense because they realized the switching scheme wasn't working and they were getting eaten alive. And they immediately started to get some help. When they went zone, they got 3 straight stops. But the problem is you probably can't do that the whole time. And did the Pelicans have another adjustment, another counter? And the answer was no. And look, you have your main defense, your shell defense in a sense of like what you do, your core concept there. And that's switching. So I'm not expecting New Orleans to run a completely different defense out there. But it was clearly not working in this game. And when you saw a guy like Trey Jemison just getting cooked over and over and over again, and we'll get more to the big men in the next segment, you've got to do something sooner rather than later. And they just didn't in this game. Now, part of it was just the bench wasn't good. And when you didn't have Brandon Ingram out there in those minutes, it was really rough. Whereas for the Dallas Mavericks, one of Kyrie or Luka is on the court at any given time. So truthfully, I don't know if there was much they could have done on the defensive side of the ball in this game. Maybe this is just one of those where it's a real bad matchup and it's just kind of as simple as that. And I think that is a very realistic possibility, but it would have been nice to have seen them do some things differently, right? Like at a certain point, can you try something else? And now look, there aren't really many other options. When we were looking at this game, I had a couple people tweeting me like, play Karlo, play Karlo, play Karlo. And he eventually got in the game in garbage time. And we'll talk about his minutes and his role in the next segment here. They needed to get stops. And I don't know if Karlo Matkovic was going to be the guy that was like getting stops for this team, right? Like leaning in offensively wasn't going to do it. And I had someone even tweet at me, and I'm not trying to call anyone out because I get the question, is like, why not lean more in defensively? And it's like, well, who could you go to? Right? Like who was, here was your bench in this game. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Jamal Cain, Jalen Noel, Trey Jemison, Antonio Reeves, Karlo Matkovic, and Daniel Tice. Let's take Reeves and Matkovic out and Tice out, right? Like who can you go to there that's like, oh, that's the guy that'll help us? Jamal Cain's on a 2-way deal. Antonio Reeves was a second-round pick. Karlo's a second-round pick. Trey Jemison's on a 2-way deal. Jalen Noel may as well be because he was signed after the season started. He was a minus 31 in 21 minutes, by the way. It's just rough out there. Like, that's the best way to say it. It's just rough out there for the New Orleans Pelicans right now. This wasn't even a moral victory like you've seen from them. Good second quarter, but that came after a real bad first quarter and then a pretty bad third quarter as well. And the game was basically over. They are so injured, there's just not a whole lot they can do. Truthfully. I can't give you another adjustment right now that would have like saved them defensively. Dallas won the points in the paint battle 66-34, partially because of those switches, and it allowed guards to drive on the Pelicans' big man. But if you go small here, and I don't even know if you could go small with the people that you have, what's it really going to do? This team is just so freaking injured, and that's what it is. Now, there are changes you can make. We talked about it in the first segment there, right? Like there were ways you could have probably helped Brandon Ingram a little bit more. There are things that you can do defensively right now till you get Herb Jones back, till you get Dejounte Murray back. I think you're a little bit limited on. They're not all of a sudden going to start playing drop coverage. And maybe that's something they could do. That maybe would help Yves Missi a little bit, where you kind of just like funnel things down low to him in a sense. But that's not what this team is used to doing. That's not what they've practiced. So if you all of a sudden just try and roll that out, and it's not like you're going to do that without multiple practices to kind of like instill it and make sure your guys know what they're doing. And when are they going to have the time to do that? That presents the problem here. So it's just kind of one of those things of, get healthy and things will be different. Is it just going to be too little too late at that point in time? So coming up next, let's look at the big men usage in this game, because I do think that is a little bit interesting. That's coming up here next. Yeah, we'll talk Karlo. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure, and when your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. And sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. You think Steph Curry on Friday against the Pelicans is going to hit more than 4 3-pointers? What about Anthony Edwards to go for more than 27 points in the next NBA Cup game? Coke Cup hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. So if you want to get in on the action, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday. If you're still listening, I appreciate y'all. It ain't easy in these Pelican streets right now, is it? But we're looking at interesting things they can do differently, adjustments they'll probably try and make for this Cleveland Cavaliers game tonight. And if they don't, oh boy, we're gonna have some, maybe an angry cast, or maybe it's even just like an I'm disappointed cast on Locked On Pelicans tomorrow. Now for your second listen, by the way, Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold for this New Orleans Saints team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. He's also on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're looking at, the kind of the contrast between the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans in this game, a 132-91, that hurts to say, loss for the New Orleans Pelicans. It was rough. That's a rough game. There's just no getting around that. 41 points, that's pretty unacceptable even with all of the injuries here, but you're really seeing some things that the Pelicans can learn from this game. They've got to find a different way to get Brandon Ingram going. Look, I'm not even upset with his play. There's just only so much he can do with no help out there and being defended like that. Find a way to get him open. That's on the coaching staff. Simple as that. Defense, be prepared, know what might work, know what might not, and have a plan B to go. They didn't do that here. And look at how the Dallas Mavericks came in with the exact right game plan versus the Pelicans, who didn't. Another thing that I think is interesting is the big man usage in this game. The Pelicans didn't win that offensive rebounding battle in a way that they really needed to. They actually lost second chance points in this game. That's an area they need to go after. Look, if you're not going to go do that, or you don't have guys that are being effective, you need to do something differently. In this game, the way the Pelicans were going to get back in, it was not by leaning in on offense. It was going to be by getting stops. Now, I don't think they have a guy that's going to help you get stops on the bench here. But who wasn't? Was Trey Jemison. This was someone who was getting picked on defensively repeatedly. So why did it take so long for Karlo Matkovic to get into the game, who only got into the game when they basically pulled everyone and were like, yeah, we're done. We're punting here. And that was with 7 minutes left to go. I know a lot of y'all were like, wait, why isn't Karlo playing? They just recalled him from Birmingham. Birmingham Squadron don't play until Friday. So the day after Thanksgiving, there's no reason on a Tuesday or a Monday when he was recalled to just leave him there or not have him be with the team. These reps are valuable for him. Just being around the team, if you're healthy to travel, is an important thing, I think. So that is why they recalled Karlo, not because they thought he was going to play or something like that. But look, when Trey Jemison ain't it, and Yves Missi was getting picked on in this game too. He didn't have near the impact that we would want on the defensive side of the ball. Not so much his fault. Trey Jemison wasn't it. He hurts you offensively. His hands are not good. So if he's not grabbing offensive rebounds, it's going to lead to turnovers and bad passes and things like that. Why not try Karlo, right? Why not try and find that big man. You might need someone like that who can shoot, because all of the other big men you played in this one, we're not really going to count Jeremiah Robinson Earl in that center rotation. So Yves Missi and Trey Jemison, they don't shoot. And you look at the Dallas Mavericks big men, and it's about finding, and this has been an issue for the Pelicans the whole Zion era. And I'll explain why it's difficult in a second here. Look at the Dallas Mavericks, who have found the right complementary big men. They drafted Derek Lively II, who's been great for them. They traded for Daniel Gafford last season, who's been an impactful player. They also traded for PJ Washington, who's been really good for them too, who's kind of the key to their defense and everything. They found the complementary big men to put around Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Now, that's easier said than done because they have two guards. If one of their star players was a Zion Williamson or someone like that, it is much more difficult to find a complementary big man to put out there. But Karlo does at least have the profile of one, even if he doesn't have the experience or anything like that. So yeah, playing him would have been smart. I don't expect him to be a difference maker. I think Willie Green has shown that if you are young, a rookie or a young player, he will play you if you're good. Yves Missi is starting his rookie year. Herb Jones started his rookie year. If you're young and good and fit what they're doing, he will play you. It probably says a lot that Karlo is in the G League and not getting minutes, about what they've seen from him in practice and on all the stuff that we don't get to see. There is very much a type of player that is too good for the G League, but not good enough to be playing, make an impact at the NBA level. And I wonder, I don't know if it is, Karlo could be that. Look, I would like nothing more than for him to be really, really good and to really fit on this team. That would be really important, and they could use that. But they need to at least try, right? Like when Trey's giving you nothing, Trey Jemison is giving you nothing in the 17 minutes he played, try something else. Try something else. When you're down that many points, even before the 7-minute mark, try something else. Right? You've got nothing to lose there. You'll lose by more. Look, 40 points, 50 points, who cares? There's no difference there. Your point differential, don't be like, oh, it's more point difference. No, who cares between 40 and 50 points when you're that negative? Just keep going down. And I think that is really disappointing that they're not kind of trying to do some of that. And that I feel, makes it seem like they're a little bit stubborn. Now, they, recently went to Trey Jemison. So there's something to be said for that maybe they want to give it more time for him to see and work out, and don't want to really pull him out yet and let him kind of get into a rhythm. That's fair. And if that's it, okay, sure. But not loving some of those minutes that we're seeing from this team. And I think that's something, or not from Trey Jemison. And I think that's pretty telling. You've got another guy that you drafted, that you've invested in. Give them a try. That's probably worth doing sooner rather than later. I don't know if they'll do it against Cleveland with kind of two bruisier big men, but might be worth a shot. They definitely need to do something different, because they need to if they want to try and start winning again and not be too far out by the start of the new year, when that's going to be a real important thing. And we might be talking draft and tanking and what that could mean. And a lost season this year feels like it could be really tough to swallow for a variety of different reasons. We'll look at that, maybe later in the week, maybe next week. So we got a lot more to come here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Look, I appreciate y'all tuning in, even after all the losses. I know it's exhausting. It's not fun. Hopefully we get some reinforcements soon. We'll see how this game goes tonight against the Cleveland Cavaliers. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game. Let's do a back-to-back.